All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, episode number 62. Sometimes a little bit bad with numbers, but I got the great Kenziepuff Mack, my favorite 6 foot tall, what is it, like millionaire,
Yep.
with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent. I'm very excited to talk. We had a little bit of scheduling issues, but I'm glad we kind of get that figured out. You were just down in the great state of Florida. What was that, about a month ago, a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, earlier this month. Yep, earlier in February it was.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
free state of Florida.
Yeah, my fiance and I are going down there in about a week, and it's going to be a complete and total change of pace. This weekend, I'm going to be at the Libertarian Party convention, and I'm sure you'll have lots
Oh,
to say about
wow.
that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there's lots of cool people there. Tom Woods, Dave Smith, and a bunch of people that I know within the Libertarian Party. And then next weekend we'll be down Sarasota Beach, kind of figuring out, the location for our wedding exactly. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm very excited. So
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's 9 months away, and I feel like we got most of the shit kind of like tucked away, and we figured out what we wanted to do. But we just want to make sure we can go down there. And not only that, it's the free state of Florida, and everything's like better down there.
Yeah.
You'd like swim like 80 degrees. I'm in southwestern Pennsylvania, so it's like, let me see, 40 degrees right now, and this is like a nice day in the winter time. So
Yeah.
like versus going down there in 80 degrees in December and swimming, there's no
It's
comparison.
much better. Yeah, when we left early February, we had a ice storm.
Mhm.
And luckily they got the airport and stuff cleaned off before we left.
Mhm.
And then we got down to Florida. It was like 70s and sunny the whole time. And then when we got back about a week later, we had like 9 or 10 inches of snow, which is weird for where we are, but it happens every once in a while. But
No, that's absolutely horrible. I can't stand this white shit. I've lived in Pennsylvania for 26 and a half years. I lived in Cleveland for about another year and a half, and I fuck both of them, seriously. So I kind of wanted to get on to the Libertarian Party stuff and the I guess strategy, because you've been one of my favorite follows. And not that we
Thanks.
necessarily yeah, of course, not that we necessarily disagree, because I don't disagree with anyone necessarily on strategy. I may disagree on what the best path is, but I think it's more of, I hate saying it this way, but it's almost subjective, where you got to play to your locale, and whatever you deem is best, then you do that. And I support you no matter what. Like that one guy, Brandon Harnish, I think his name is, over in Indiana. He's doing great stuff. And he's even said that he's worked with some LP people, and it's been very good to him that way. So, if that's your best way forward, you got my support. So let's start off. What brought you to libertarianism? I've heard you tell this story, but just for people who may not know, detail out your Lulbert phase and how you got to be a based Hoppian, as they would say.
Well, actually now, in some recent events have happened that make my Lulbert phase make a lot more sense to me of why it was a Lulbert phase. But I started out, I really didn't get involved with politics or anything at all. I could have voted for the first time in the 2012 election, but I just didn't care, which that was a pretty like historical election. I just could not care less.
They all are.
Right. They're all historic. Oh my goodness. But I just really didn't care about politics. It's not really something our parents ever talked to us about. So many people, when they get into libertarianism, they're like, oh, my dad was a neocon, so was I. Or, oh, my parents are crazy Democrats, so that's what I was. I didn't really have that. In later years, I have figured out it's because my parents don't agree on politics. So that's why they never talked to my brother and I about it, because they couldn't decide which way to go. But it was kind of nice, because they all they ever told us is, if you're gonna vote, neither of us vote a straight ticket. Not sure if I believe that, but now that I'm older, I'm like, I don't know about that, Dad, but okay. But they told us we just vote for the best person. All the generic like boomer con advice, basically, about politics. But they never sat us down, and aside from learning history, like political history in school, I never learned about politics, never learned about the history of the parties. I just had basic American history essentially, and that's it. And so instead of taking that as, wow, I'll investigate and learn myself, I took that as, I don't even know about this is dumb. And then every time I tried to get into it, of course, people would bicker back and forth, and it was so much of a hassle. So I just figured, you know what, there's better stuff for me to invest my time in. So when I entered college, a couple years in late 2015, I had this girl reach out to me on Facebook who I had not spoken to since middle school. It was like a friend of a Facebook friend type of thing. But she messaged me and told me that she was looking for somebody to be president of a chapter of Young Americans for Liberty at the college that I was going to at the time. And I asked her what the heck that was because I didn't know. And she explained to me, oh, it's sort of students for Ron Paul, assuming that I would know who Ron Paul is. And I didn't even know who Ron Paul was. That's how far gone I was, just not political at all. And so she asked me out for coffee just to, obviously give her pitch on why I should join. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, oh, I haven't seen this girl in a while. It might be nice to catch up. So we ended up going out for coffee. I told her, listen, I'm a religion major. I'm not really into politics. Like, I don't really think I'm going to be good at this. I was very shy at the time. I wasn't involved in any clubs or anything. I wasn't doing like my costuming thing or anything like that yet. So I basically had no hobbies, just kind of floating through life. Like, oh, I'll just get through college and see what's up. And this girl comes along and says, hey, you should be the president. First of all, she kind of bait and switched me because she told me, oh, I just want you to join. And then she laid it on me. Oh, I think you should be the president of the club. That was a little too much responsibility for me, but she was just a good salesman and it sounded like fun. And the thing that I did honestly enjoy about being involved, obviously I said yes. The thing I enjoyed about being involved with Young Americans for Liberty is you actually got to go out and do events. It wasn't just sitting around in a room talking and arguing about politics. You actually got to go out and roll 6-foot tall beach balls around campuses for free speech and things like that. And so after about a year of that, well, actually probably like 7 or 8 months, I moved up to state chair for my state. And so then I got to travel around with Young Americans for Liberty and go to different colleges and do petitions and have people sign up for stuff. And it was honestly a really fun time, but it was still my Lulbert phase, unfortunately, because I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't reading anything. I was getting a bunch of t-shirts that said taxation is theft on them and saying stuff like end the Fed, but I didn't know any of the economics behind that. I didn't know really anything beyond slogans, which now I think is a big problem. And I think a lot of these organizations that get young people involved on the bridge to politics like that are really good. But I think the important thing, what I found out was important, is you have to go beyond that. You can't just go around. And that's why it was my Lulbert phase. It wasn't because I was a giant leftist. I tell people I was probably definitely by default left leaning just because I was like a pop culture person. So of course, but I never identified as like a feminist or a left wing or Democrat or anything like that. I always said, oh, I'm an independent and I'm libertarian. So it was definitely more Lulbert than like a leftist thing, because I do think there's a difference there for a lot of people. And so that's definitely what it was. I just didn't know anything. It wasn't like a malicious, like, yeah, screw the system and I hate right wingers and Republicans are dumb. And it wasn't anything like that. It was just, I didn't know anything. And so eventually I got out of Young Americans for Liberty, but I met someone while I was in there named TJ Roberts. Shout out to TJ. He's great. And he introduced me to the Mises Institute and everybody down there. And actually he told me, hey, this is fast forwarding to like 2017-ish. So I'd been a state chair with Yale. I stopped that. And I was kind of just still floating through college. And I wasn't involved with Young Americans for Liberty anymore. But I was still going to the conventions and stuff because I was college age. So I went to like the national convention, and I actually went to like the Students for Liberty International Conference too in DC, which is when I really realized, these people are left wing and I don't think I'm left wing. But I also don't think I'm right wing, because at this point I'm a Lulbert. So I'm like, I'm not left wing or right wing, but I don't know what these people are, but I'm not it. Because I heard all kinds of crazy, the free market's not capitalism folks were there, like preaching that kind of stuff. And that rubbed me kind of the wrong way. And I got to meet Eric July at that conference. So that was cool. Mm-hmm. So that's when 2017, I started getting involved with Mises people. Like my friend TJ, and honestly, Eric July is pretty associated with Mises guys too. So I started looking into that. And then in 2018, finally, after years of kind of floundering around, calling myself libertarian, but not really looking into it, I attended Mises University down in Auburn, Alabama at the Mises Institute. and I got to meet, Walter Block, Tom Woods, all those guys, Jeff Dice, everybody. And it was amazing. First of all, if you're watching this and you're like, what is that? I'm that age. You need to go. Tho Bishop is pretty much the only reason I got to go. Technically I was a little bit old because I was getting to the point where like I wasn't really college age anymore. I was like in my 5th year of college, but TJ put in a good word for me, and Tho let me go essentially. And so I ended up getting in and meeting all those really cool people, and most importantly, getting a bunch of books, and actually started reading things. And I remember sitting in the economics lectures, and there's definitely entry level to like intermediate to more difficult ones while you're there. But I was sitting in the entry level stuff like, oh, wow, I have no idea what these guys are talking about. It was like and Austrian economics to me is it's not like other economics. It's very much, I really do think for the average person, if they would sit down and just take like an online course, or Mises has a lot of online stuff for free, they would get it. It's not like sitting in a college class going, what are these graphs and these, I don't understand all this. It's not like that at all. But I still didn't get it. So I was like, wow, I have a lot of learning to do. So from like 2018, when I went to Mises University, to probably like, I don't know, still now, I mean, I'm still learning, but that's kind of when I started making the transition from I'm not right wing or left wing to, well, what is libertarianism actually? It's not just taxation is theft and end the Federal Reserve. What does that actually mean to people? Because, and I dealt with this with activism, I was running into people and they'd ask me what libertarianism was, and I couldn't really tell them. I was just like, I don't know, man, live and let live. But that doesn't mean anything to people. So now I'm involved with a lot more people that are into more of the localism stuff and actually meeting people in your community and connecting with people, and putting that together with actually, knowing what you're talking about more, instead of just having slogans, to be able to meet people where they're at and be able to explain to them why you believe what you believe, instead of just kind of doing it because you're an edgy college student and you don't want to be called, a Bernie supporter. So obviously you're just going to be libertarian. So,
Right.
So yeah. And so now I'm, all the way to calling myself just openly right wing, and I'm Hoppian, but I still do refer to myself as a libertarian, which is kind of contentious for some people. But I just can't give it up. I can't give up that label. People are like, don't call yourself libertarian. The label's lost to left-wing people. You can't save it. But I had to ask myself, and I ask other people this, at what point do we stop letting people take over labels and keep creating new ones for them to then take over? We got to make a stand at some point. So libertarian is where I'm making that stand. But I call myself Hoppian just because it kind of honestly weeds bad people out right away, to be honest, to call yourself that. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree with your kind of last point there, that eventually we do have to make a stand for the words that we believe mean something to us, because I was introduced to libertarianism by, and people are going to freak, and if they don't already, but like Stefan Molyneux, right? My brother introduced me to him.
I love Stefan.
So do I. And
I met him actually.
Oh, did you really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I met him back in, actually, I met him back 2016. So it was like on my journey I have a picture with him that I like to tweet out every once in a while to freak people out, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I love his peaceful parenting stuff.
Yeah, so do I. And I never understood the outrage, because he's not like aggressive. He's not rude. He debates anybody.
He's
everybody.
Canadian. He's polite.
Right. But he really taught me a lot about this stuff. And Peter Schiff was kind of like the guy that got me into all the Austrian economics. I think he's just a national treasure. But like Stefan was the one who really introduced me to libertarianism, because my brother was listening to him, and originally my brother was like a raging leftist, and I consider myself more of like a neocon initially.
Yeah.
But he was like a raging leftist, so I'm like, oh well, fuck this. I leave me the fuck alone. I don't want to hear about this.
I'm surprised he was listening to him, because it's so funny now.
Well, he wasn't. he was listening to the Young Turks initially, and then he started getting to Stefan Mondu. So I guess I should have prefaced it that way. But
so he made a bridge at some point.
Right. And then he became a libertarian, and then he used to watch like Amazing Atheists, the Young Turks, all those kind of guys. And he would show me that stuff, and I'm like, man, like I just can't stand these people. Like I don't know why they're wrong, but something about them just makes them very punchable. Not saying that you should, but so he introduced me to Stefan, and I'm like, man, this guy's like really fucking smart. And I was listening to his talks with people, and you know how smart he is on philosophy and everything else. And that really kind of brought me to Eric July, Larry Sharp, and some of the other libertarian thinkers. And funny enough, actually, Spike Cohen is the one who kind of got me to Dave Smith, and which subsequently led me to Scott Horton. And my brother also introduced me to Tom Woods. So that's kind of like my full journey to libertarianism. I wouldn't ever really consider myself a lulbert, but I definitely had a phase where I was a lot less educated than I am now. And it seems like Hoppe has become like a big thing recently. I don't know what spurred that, but perhaps to give a little bit more.
I'm just kidding.
Perhaps to give a little bit more context here. Back in, I want to say 2017, I think I was listening to Eric July a lot. I remember him talking about left libertarians. I'm like, who the fuck's a left libertarian? I've never heard of that in my life. Right. And then last year I went to the Libertarian Party convention here in Pennsylvania, and I had like a come to Jesus moment.
You met them.
Oh my God.
That was me at the Students for Liberty conference. I had the same, that was my experience. And I was like, oh, I'm not these people. I don't know what these people are, but I'm not it.
Right. Well, you know, I've had this thought a lot, and I think you'll probably agree. It's like the people who are like most for sex work, and not that I'm like for glorifying it. Obviously, you know, hey, it should be legal, but like, I'm not. If I have kids, I don't want my daughter to be a fucking sex worker or a porn star.
But that's a controversial statement to those people.
It is. And I consider myself a socially conservative libertarian, right? Because I believe that, you know, strong traditional families, tight-knit communities tolerate freedom and the values that we cherish the most, the best. So we can't have degenerates or people that, you know, are advocating for sex work in the community, because you're going to bring down the, you know, basically the net value of the community, because we're, you know, that degeneracy doesn't tolerate freedom the same way that tight-knit families do. I'm sorry, my dogs are going fucking nuts downstairs.
That's all right.
I don't know. But yeah, I like met these people. I'm like, we both call each other libertarians, but like I feel like I'm on a different planet than these freaking people.
Yeah, there was a point where I just had a terrible time at that international student. I got locked out of my Airbnb. I was like, everyone I stayed with was like very left libertarian, and still is. I just bumped into one of the guys who actually locked me out of my Airbnb on Twitter the other day, and immediately blocked him because he's still left libertarian. But he, I between getting locked out of my Airbnb because people were out drunk and partying, which happens at libertarian conferences, but that's never been my thing. So I missed a bunch of the lectures that I wanted to see the next day because I had to stay at one of my boss for Young Americans for Liberty let me sleep on their couch of their apartment because I literally couldn't get back into where I was staying. And then I was running into a bunch of feminists, and I'm like, where am I? What planet am I on? I was like, is it because there's a bunch of Europeans here? Like, I'm confused. I don't understand. And it was so funny. I feel like Eric July and I were very out of place at that conference. He actually backwards performed at that conference. And I feel like we were very out of place there.
Yeah, I like, it's so shocking to me because it seems like the most prominent libertarian thinkers, Dave Smith, Tom Woods, you know, all the guys from the Mises Institute, they're all, I don't want to necessarily say right-leaning, although they actually probably, if you look at their values, they probably are. But like, those are like the most prominent libertarian thinkers, but then you have this huge faction of left libertarians. And I don't know, like, who's a prominent left libertarian that you could like name off the top of your head? I honestly, and this may be a poor reflection on me, but I don't think I could name one. Like, I think Nick Sorwork comes to mind, but I don't think he's even really prominent.
You could probably do almost anybody from Reason or Cato.
Okay, yeah, I guess that's a fair point.
Like pretty much any of the think tank DC libertarian types are going to be I mean, I would not like to call them prominent thinkers, but I mean, they do have an audience. So, and that is
Right.
a lot of people, when they think of libertarianism, they think of Cato Institute and Reason Magazine, which is horrifying, but
Right. Well, like I said, this is
we're
probably
working on it.
right. This is probably a poor reflection on me because that's not at all what I think of. But over the last 2 years, and especially since getting on Twitter, I've kind of had that come to Jesus moment where I realized,
Yeah.
like, man, this movement really has been hijacked by like a large group of people who really aren't like good libertarians, especially when you see people like advocating for vaccine mandates or making libertarian justifications for it.
Yeah.
Like, these are the people that I share a label with,
Yeah.
and people think of them when they think of libertarian, and when I tell them I'm a libertarian, like, oh, so you're probably for like vaccine mandates and sex work.
Yeah.
No, that's not me at all.
No.
I'm the furthest thing from that. So the one thing I kind of wanted to ask about with you and other people who consider themselves right-leaning is that sometimes I feel like it almost gets to be, I don't want to say circle jerk, because this also happens with the red pill, blue pill analogy when people apply
Yeah.
politically. It seems like sometimes people may box everything good in the right wing kind of sphere and everything that's bad in the left wing sphere, right? Kind of like how libertarians say, oh, I'm so red pilled. And everything that they believe is good in the red pill sphere, but then everything that they don't like is in the blue pill sphere. It seems to be too much like a hammer and a nail thing, where they use this red pill analogy as a hammer, and everything that's blue pills and
Yeah.
nail are, you kind of see where I'm going with it. So,
Yeah, definitely.
what's your thoughts on what makes somebody right wing versus what makes somebody left wing?
So this is a good question because this is ultimately why I started calling myself right wing and gave up on they're the same bird, they're the different wings on the same bird, guys, they're the same. Is because and credit to Jared from Hopian.org and Democracy on Twitter, definitely one of the biggest people with convincing me of this and actually explaining it to me, because it is so easy to just say, well, I'm right wing because it's everything that's right in the world and moral and just, but a lot of people, that's not going to be enough for them. It
Right.
should be, but it's not, especially if they're coming from somewhere that is maybe more middle of the road, or they're not as far into this as you are. Like where I came from, I was lucky enough to have friends that were associated with the Mises Institute and those people that were willing to say, hey, you should go to this conference. It would change your mind on a lot of things. You'll learn a lot, instead of saying, well, you're just a low bird. Blah, 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 blah. And don't get me wrong, I did get called that a lot, and they were correct. They were correct. And I've done that to people, but usually if I can tell that someone is coming my way, but kind of isn't making that connection yet, the biggest distinction is hierarchy versus egalitarianism. And you'll see this a lot with left libertarian types. And this is where it actually makes sense that a lot of the left libertarian types that I were running into called themselves feminists and were completely fine with that, and would talk about, racial justice, but not in a necessarily get the state out of it way. A lot of times they were fine with state involvement. They just wanted it to go a different way instead of this way. And it always rubbed me the wrong way, but I couldn't make the connection of why they were fine. Because to me, I would look at feminism and I couldn't tell them why, but I knew I don't agree with that and you do. But we both call ourselves libertarians, so I guess it's fine. And then somebody explained to me, egalitarianism it's not possible. First of all, it's not natural at all. You can't make everybody equal. And you think, well, that's obvious, but it's not really. A lot of conservatives preach the equality of opportunity, not of outcome, but that's actually still egalitarian. That's not really possible either. You can't possibly make sure everybody's coming from the same place in their life, just like you can't make sure everybody ends up at the same place in their life. And so it was explained to me as not an evil versus good thing, which I think a lot of us jump to at this point in time, and with good reason. It's hard to look at the last 2 years and not just start thinking these people are just evil. This isn't just politics. These people are straight up evil, but that doesn't work with everybody. And so I call myself right wing because I think an important and necessary aspect of libertarianism is anti-egalitarianism. Because ultimately, if you're going to say, I want people to be equal, whether it's starting off or ending up, something's going to have to enforce that. And as an anarcho-capitalist, it's going to be the state. The state's going to come in, and that's going to be the easiest solution for humans to use to bludgeon other people into doing what they want, whether they think it's a good cause or not. Because that's another thing I think a lot of people don't necessarily make the connection on. It was so hard for me to condemn feminism. That's just the easiest example for me, because that was kind of like my realization that, hey, maybe these people don't have good intentions, because they would say things like, we don't hate men, we just want women to be equal to men. And when you say that, if you don't think about it, it doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like, oh, okay, of course, we want everyone to be equal, especially when, if as an American, you get that propaganda pumped into you at a young age. All men are created equal and all this stuff. You're just like, oh, well, how can I tell them feminism is stupid when they're saying they're for equality? That's ridiculous. But then when you start thinking about it, well, how are you going to enforce that? Well, the state's going to have to come in and make sure that quotas are met in workplaces, and put all these, we saw with the Me Too stuff, how militant the feminism stuff could get when it really came out to be anti-men in a lot of cases. And just looking at real world examples like that, of this disconnection between people saying that, no, we're for this really moral cause that on the surface seems fine, and then watching in practice what that actually means, which is always some form of state involvement, which essentially means putting a gun to somebody's head and saying, you will say that you are equal to this person or you will be removed. And libertarians not being willing to be like, well, if they're going to remove me from this situation because I don't believe what they believe, maybe we should start doing that to people in our circles. Hey, if you're preaching this stuff that clearly is going to lead to state involvement and aggression on people, then you're not going to be allowed to associate with me, to be in my circles. I'm not allowing that. So I started calling myself right-wing mostly because of the egalitarianism stuff, which a lot of that was me reading Rothbard, the collection of essays, Egalitarianism as a Revolt Against Human Nature. It's a collection of essays of Rothbard, and one of those is about egalitarianism, and it just really hit it home for me. And it really clicked, which the first thing I read that clicked was Anatomy of the State. And then I got to the egalitarianism point, and I don't think a lot of people get to that point. I think they read Anatomy of the State, they're like, cool, I don't like the state, but they never get to the conclusion of, well, are there seemingly good causes that I may be supporting that the underlying issue is those are trying to make everyone be equal in one way or the other, and that's gonna involve force always. There's no way it's not going to. Whereas I was meeting right-wingers who acknowledged people are different. That's fine. Actually, that's good. Division of labor. We need people to be different. If we all thought the same, we'd all just be NPCs walking around. I know that's an old meme now, but it's real.
Wearing a mask, right?
We'd all just be walking around, staring at our phones, waiting for them to tell us when we're going to World War III, wearing masks. So, yeah. And I wasn't cool with that. And then I got involved with a bunch of right-wing people who are willing to call themselves right-wing, who acknowledged, no, there's differences and there's a natural hierarchy and an order of things. And myself also, I think, being Christian, that kind of clicked for me too. Not everybody that I met that considers themselves right-wing is Christian, but they at least acknowledge that it's important. And also coming from my standpoint of, okay, yeah, fathers are the heads of the household, then mothers have this. And no, a father and a mother might not be equal, quote unquote, in their household, but they're essential to make that unit work. So once I started connecting all of that and stuff that I'd seen in my own life work, it just kind of all made sense. And I felt silly forever trying to differentiate myself from people who clearly believe everything that I believe. And I also, you mentioned neoconservatism. This is another thing that I think is why a lot of people don't make that leap from like left wing to right wing and like they're the same. Because I think a lot of people, when you think right wing, unfortunately, you think people like Dick Cheney and George Bush and honestly Ben Shapiro and people like that. And you think, oh gosh, I don't want to be associated with those guys either. Those guys are, no thank you. It's the neocons. You don't want to be associated with them. So then you get the point and you're like, cool, I'm not with them, but I'm not with the left. And then at some point the light bulb clicks and you're like, hold up. Let me actually look at everything that neoconservatives believe and everything that leftists believe and historically what has gone on. And you start to realize, oh, those are the same people. They're all globalists. They're all essentially in practice, they preach that they want these things, but like Michael Mao says, oh, conservatism is progressivism driving the speed limit. A lot of that driving the speed limit or going a little over the speed limit is neoconservatives within the Republican Party that say they stand up for family values and all this stuff. But when it comes down to it, they're not standing up for any of that. They're just kind of letting it kick the door in and wipe people out. And they're like, it's fine. So I think that's another thing that clicked for me is the neoconservative thing, because I couldn't get it out of my head that every time I thought of right wing, I was thinking of these neoconservatives who I know don't stand for anything that I believe or stand for.
I just want to, sorry to interrupt, but
oh, you're fine.
I'm very, very glad you're getting to this point, because this is something that I've wrestled with relentlessly, especially since starting this podcast, talking to, people who consider themselves Hoppians or right wingers, or, a lot of people that just lean right in general. This is something that I've really wrestled with, because indulge me on a rant here real quick.
Oh, you're fine.
You look at, and this is going to trigger a lot of people in the right wing camp particular, and I'm okay with that, but you look at Donald Trump in his last, year, where we're signing bailout packages. He didn't end any of the wars. He made some of them worse with drone strikes, and he's literally pushing for, all this basically UBI and socialism and, expanding wars. And it's like, well, this isn't like the good right. Like, this is not what I think of when I think of a good right winger, right? This looks like leftism in practice. And then you also hit on Ben Shapiro and a lot of these popular right wingers. I've seen you talk about Charlie Kirk being Conservatism Inc. These are like the biggest voices in conservatism now.
Yeah.
And this is something that once again, I've battled with a lot, because it's like, okay, well, I consider myself more right leaning than left leaning, obviously, because, well, I mean, I've been with, my fiance now for 3 years. We're going to get married. We want to have a family. And I've told her countless times, like, look, if we have kids, there's no plan B. There's not a plan B. That's it. Because I will not date someone that's a single mom, and that may piss people off. I'm okay with that, because I'm not going to, I think that's a character fault for some people, and once again, that's going to piss people off too. But it is your responsibility when you have a kid. It's no longer about you, it's about the fucking kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so important. So, but where I kind of wrestle towards the more right-wing thing, I'm sorry, this may not be perfectly coherent, but a lot of these people also share the same values as me, although when you look at the political ramifications of voting for them and what they do when they're elected, they're not always reflective of those values. But then once again, you look at their kind of cultural values, I more so agree with them. Whereas, you look at the left and it's like, okay, I don't agree with anything there.
Right.
Like some of them, a handful maybe good on like war and personal liberty, but like not really. Not very many. So, I'm sorry to kind of interrupt you and go on a little bit of a tirade there, but that's been something I've been wrestling with, and it kind of gives me pause, because originally I was a little bit more binary libertarian, right? Where it has to be the Libertarian Party, but then, over the last couple months, it's really been, for me, like I said, something I've wrestled with and kind of thought, well, maybe there's more than just this binary. Maybe there's more than just it has to be the Libertarian Party. And obviously I don't consider the Democrats, just because it goes without saying, right?
Yeah.
For people in our
They're
circle,
not on the map.
right? And I don't want people to think that I'm not condemning them or anything they do, obviously. But I don't have to tell people this. This is so abundantly clear. I shouldn't have to say the Democrats and the Democrat Party are bad.
Every time I see someone say, "Oh, I can't decide if the Republicans or the Democrats are worse," I'm like, okay, maybe pre-2016 you can get away with that stuff. That's being very generous, to be honest. Right. If post-2016 you're saying, gee, or even 2020, heck, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. The craziness that's going on. And I don't want to get anybody censored, but we all know what I'm talking about. If after that, and people literally locking their cities down, and was very, very one way, There was a
Mhm.
handful of Republican governors that were freaks about it. Then again, you look at their values and they're not actually living out those conservative values that they say. So,
Mhm.
can you really call them conservatives at that point? But it's very obvious that one side might not always be the best, but they're allies with us completely on social values. And I struggle with this a lot. I used to be one of those, thank you, Young Americans for Liberty, that stupid t-shirt you give out. I don't know if they still give it out, but they used to give out Young Americans for Liberty on the front. And then on the back, it said, fiscally conservative, socially liberal. That
Thank you,
phrase is
Gary
a
Johnson.
disaster for the human race of a phrase. Thank
Mhm.
you so much for confusing everyone their entire life.
Mhm.
You can actually be libertarian and fiscally and socially conservative.
Yep.
Actually, thank you very much. Actually, it's the only way we're gonna get there, if you ask me. But which you kind of talked about earlier. But I don't know how anybody, especially after the past, I guess 3 years at this point, it's crazy. It's 3 years now.
Yeah.
Can look at that and be like, gee, I don't know which state I'd want to live in, Florida or New York. It's like, what did you stop? First of all, who are you even trying to impress? Because anybody with half a brain, which is who I want to attract personally, people with brains, I don't care about the people without brains. They're gone. We can't save
Right.
everybody. It's fine. Triage. We cannot save those people. It sucks, but it's reality. I want to attract people with brain cells.
Mhm.
And the people with brain cells go, yeah, Florida seems like a nice place to vacation, not New York City.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anybody really going for New York to vacation. Like before 2020, I'm like, man, I always wanted to go to New York, just like see New York and
Yeah, it's New
kind of
York City.
right. You're right. I just want to experience it because I've been to a decent bit of places here on
Yeah.
the East Coast. I don't go anywhere on the West Coast. I've been to Vegas once. I really wouldn't care to go back, but like I was like, yeah, I just want to go there. And now I'm like, no, probably not.
No thanks. Yeah. You probably
Yeah.
couldn't even get in now. So
No, and what's fucked up is I could show them an antibody test and say, look, I had it, but
doesn't matter.
that don't matter. And not that I would do that, could, but wouldn't.
Yeah.
One other thing I was listening to in one of your live streams recently was the talk about gatekeeping. And you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier about removing people. And I do think that's important because, we kind of have to take a stand somewhere. And once again, if you have degeneracy and, these ridiculous lolberts that aren't good on anything that will literally justify vaccine mandates where they're okay with you being forced down and have a needle shoved in your arm, then like, why should I side with you if literally you're going to push?
Stab me in the back?
Yeah, well, stab me in the shoulder
the
or in
arm.
the back. Yeah. what good are you at that point? So this was something that once again I wrestled with for a little bit, but now I kind of look at it a little bit more clear and think, okay, well, maybe we need to gatekeep a little bit. Maybe we need to kind of have like a barrier to entry and tell these people, like, look, if you're not going to kind of toe the line here, then fuck you. Problem solved.
Yeah. I know a lot of people struggle with this, and I struggle with this too, but ultimately I think my own journey kind of showed me why it's important. Like I said earlier when we were talking, I had people call me a lolbert and say really, really mean, like just straight up mean things to me online. Oh my gosh, people say mean things online. Oh no. But and things that legitimately I think a lot of people would have just been like, well, fine, I'm not calling myself libertarian. These people are big meanie heads. But in my opinion, I don't really care if it makes you mad. If people making fun of you, even if they're just poking fun, because I don't even think a lot of it's malicious. I think a lot of it is just people teasing each other, like, yeah, okay, whatever. And we jokingly call each other statists all the time. And a lot of it's just banter. But even the stuff that's not banter and the people that are seriously saying, you don't know what you're talking about, you sound like an idiot, which is something I had said to me a lot, and they were correct at that point in time. If you can't, this is such a boomerism, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Like, seriously. I mean, because it was under pressure and under fire like that I was like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong, and I am going to read these books. I am going to read economics so that you don't think I'm stupid and just a typical, grifter woman and just coming in here, calling myself an ANCAP for likes and followers and things like that. And that's why I am where I am today, because people essentially gate kept Wolbert me out of their circles until I was able to demonstrate that I at least understood the core values and things that you're supposed to believe if you are actually a libertarian and not just spouting slogans. So I definitely get it's not fun to be the person that is saying, I'm sorry, but I'm kicking you out of this, group chat. I've kicked people on my Telegram for saying stupid things. Like somebody in my Telegram called me anti-white this past week, which is hilarious. I mean, look at me. Okay. Because
You're doing great.
I'm doing great. Because I said that it's not that I don't care about the war between Russia and the Ukraine, but I have bigger fish to fry here at home, and I'm anti-war. I'm not gonna sign up for my kids in 20 years to be going to fight over in Europe in an ongoing war that we're gonna get. And I got called anti-white and said I should care because those are two groups of white people fighting. And I'm like, no, buddy, I don't care.
So what's hilarious about that is that it's literally like the exact opposite of leftism, except for, well, maybe that's not the right way to phrase it.
Actually, this dude was openly calling himself a leftist. So.
Okay, well, it's kind of like.
He was a pro-white leftist. Explain that.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. We tried to tell him that doesn't make any sense.
I feel like you would be so isolated being a pro-white leftist just because they wouldn't want to talk to you. And then obviously nobody on the right wing or libertarian kind of side of the aisle.
Well, and that's what happened. He got kicked out of my circle. So you're isolating yourself. But here again, he was using a label that identified, even though he agreed with me on some stuff, I think call the white nationalists all sorts of stupid stuff just because I don't hate myself for being white. So he obviously agreed with me on that. I don't think anybody should hate themselves for being white. But he was calling himself a leftist and had all these we should give everybody free healthcare and stuff. And I was trying to explain to him, like I kind of just said earlier, that's at the point of a gun. You realize that, right? And you're just going to get us back here because unsound fiscal policy gets us to bigger government, which gets us to leftism. That's how this works. Which is why some of the quote unquote right wing, he was calling himself a leftist, but I have seen some right wingers be like, social programs are fine as long as they're just for white people. And I'm like, you're just going to end up with a society that hates white people again. It's a circle, guys. It's a circle. But anyways, back to what we were saying, gatekeeping. I get why it makes people uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to be. I have a clip now from one of my live streams that I send to people. I say, I at this point, I do not care if people think I am the bad guy. I would rather be viewed as being the bad guy if it means I'm surrounding myself with actually good people who actually believe what I believe, instead of being the nice guy that's like, sure, come on in. Bernie supporter who just stopped supporting Bernie 3 months ago and still is calling themselves a Democrat, but you think you're a reasonable one. But then anytime I talk about anything, you get mad about it. Like, why would I want to associate with someone like that? You wouldn't. That's like, you're just waiting to get stabbed in the back. And not only that, but the problem, the ultimate problem is, and why gatekeeping is necessary. Yeah, gatekeeping might not be necessary if the left wasn't doing it. But the left has been gatekeeping very successfully. I mean, if you have 9 out of the 10 positions that they hold, except one, you get kicked out.
Right.
That's not, you step your toe out of line. We've all seen it on Twitter and in real life. They'll get you. They don't care if you've been on their side for 2 decades. If a blue checkmark journalist says something that leftism TM recently in the past 3 years has decided is a platform thing, you're out. That's it. You don't get that. If the left wasn't doing that, we might be able to be like, yeah, come on over, buddy. It's fine. You'll eventually come our way, because a lot of people, sure, they do eventually come our way. But we don't have that luxury is basically what it is. And that it's a tough realization, but we don't have it. I mean, like you said, the figureheads of conservatism of the past just 5 to 10 years, when you look at how they're actually living their lives and their policy, it doesn't even look like conservatism. And then we talked about libertarianism. We've got all these people who clearly they claim to think taxation is theft and we should end the Federal Reserve, but they're for, jab mandates for masks on children. They don't care. Everybody should just do what you want as long as it's not hurting anyone, even if it's pumping hormones into your kids. Like, what? This is not, no, thank you. This is not, not what I'm about.
Something that's been weird is that literally saying, I don't think we should have transgender children. Transgenderism isn't like normal. Not that I think there's necessarily anything like morally wrong with these people, but clearly
it shouldn't be the norm.
Right. There's something wrong with them. And I'm not saying that it in like a derogatory way. It's just, if you want to change your sex, then clearly there's something going on there.
Something deeper than just, I'm going to do it and that's it. There's more there than, you just decided.
Right. And then saying, you also kind of alluded to this in one of your previous live streams I was listening to, is kind of have an in-group preference. That's okay. Yeah. I prefer my fiance. I'm very discriminatory, right? I discriminated against all other jobs to go work on cars. I discriminated against all Black, Asian, all other races of European women for my fiance. That's okay. I had a friend of mine at work, at the last place I worked at, and here in Pittsburgh, they were like mandating that you couldn't discriminate based on whether or not a woman's pregnant. He was saying, oh, that's discriminatory and that's bad. I said, no, there's nothing wrong with that. He's like, yeah, it's discriminatory. I said, that's okay. That's perfectly fine, because you're going to have this woman who's going to be at a reduced productive capacity because she's pregnant. And then you're going to have to deal with her being off for a period of time. And I don't have a problem with that. But once again, now the workforce is down a person. So why should they not be able to say, like, sorry, we don't want to hire you? I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah, it's weird, because even some people, they can make, because in a way, I mean, we could get into what is gatekeeping actually, but in a way, just having in-group preference is gatekeeping.
Right.
So if you're going to say gatekeeping is bad and it's mean, and a lot of those people who say that are the ones, I had this guy just really get mad at me once because I just said, well, I mean, yeah, my husband's white, so my kids are going to be white, and that's fine. And if you're Black and you want to date a Black woman, that's fine. And he's like, so you wouldn't date a Black guy? And I said, no. And he got so mad. He must have been Black. That's the only explanation. He was an anonymous account, but he just got so mad. I go, it's just in-group preference. That's all it is. There's nothing wrong with it. And you have it too. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's a whole nother story. But that's just like the easiest example I have of that. But it works the same way with political stuff. I have an in-group preference for people who are not afraid to say, I'm anti-egalitarian. I am socially more conservative. And that's where I think libertarianism needs to go to move forward, because it's what practically and strategically makes sense. And if you're somebody who doesn't agree with that, why would I let you into my circles? Right. It's the tolerance argument. Well, you're being intolerant. Okay, yeah, there's some things I don't tolerate. I'm Christian. There's a lot of things I don't tolerate. I don't tolerate evil behavior. Nobody should. There are some things you should not tolerate. But this whole tolerance, and we need to be nice to everyone. It's the what I eventually realized, and honestly, one of the big things that pushed me towards right-wingers in general, and then eventually calling myself right-wing, is the Christian thing. I kept running into these libertarians who were the live and let live types. And I thought, okay, great. At that point, I said, fine, you do you, I'll do me. I don't care what your lifestyle is. It doesn't affect me. It does, but whatever. It doesn't affect me. And that's the point I was at. And then I'm not somebody, I don't have Christian in my bio. It's something I talk about a lot on live streams and podcasts, but I don't like tweet about it constantly. I don't like tweet out Bible verses and stuff. I'm not like in your face about it. So people just sometimes don't know. And I was offhandedly mentioning it to these libertarians who are obviously atheist agnostics, something in that stripe. And they would just go insane and tell me, you can't be a Christian anarcho-capitalist. That doesn't make any sense. Clearly you want a theocracy and all of this stuff they're just projecting onto me very nastily. And I just thought, okay, well, you just said live and let live until you found out this is how I live. And the thing that I started to notice is that only goes one way. it doesn't go live and let live more traditionally. It goes live and let live however degenerate you want to be. That's fine. But the person that's saying, actually, I don't really want to associate with you because I don't really believe in that. That's not really my thing. Even if it's not for religious reasons, I've seen people go, not really a fan of that. I'm not even Christian. It's not even from like a sin thing. I just don't want to associate with that. It's kind of cringy. Just like literally say, that's cringy. No, thank you. They go insane. They would go insane and they would say, well, why not? You have to associate with it, or you're a bigot, or all this pick a phobic of any kind.
Yeah.
And I started to realize that only goes one way. I never met any socially conservative people saying live and let live that did it the other way, in my experience. I'm sure they're out there, but it was mostly clearly left libertarians who usually weren't Christians, who, when I said I was Christian, had more, quote, I hate even traditional, but that's just the easiest way to say it, views. And that's when they would start going, well, I don't want to associate with you. And I thought, well, wait a second. I thought this was live and let live. But now all of a sudden, which to me is fine. They should be, we just talked about, they should be allowed to discriminate me that way. But the problem is they're also the people saying discrimination is bad, tolerance is good, unless you're more conservative than me, which is just them gatekeeping. That's what that is. But that's why I started going, fine, I'm going to gatekeep you. I don't want to associate with you. If you want to call me a bigot over it, fine. Because I know either I do that or I'm going to be forced to have your values at some point in my life because they're going to take over, which is what we're seeing in everyday life. Every corporation 2 times a year during 2 months just becomes one social issue. And it's everywhere and you can't escape from it. And nobody thinks that's weird. Nobody thinks it's weird. It's just part of life now. That never used to be part of life decades ago. It was just like, do your business, I'll do mine, whatever. We're cool. It's fine. And that we're already seeing, it's really been such a short amount of time that we've really seen the left take hold of culture. I mean, I know it's been a long time and a short time at the same time, because, you know, there's going to be people that are like, well, in Europe, it's been in the United States. Right. It really has not been. I talked to my grandparents and even my parents, and I just think this is just insane. Nobody my parents' age was saying that fat is beautiful.
Okay, so I'm really, really glad you brought this up because this kind of tailors into my next point.
Segue.
It perfectly segues into something that I think kind of relates to the other topic of this podcast, and also another thing I want to talk to you about. But the whole feminism deal. So you seem to reject it, and I like that a lot because just to give a little brief history, right when I was in middle school, I was a little asshole, wound up kid, right? I failed 7th grade, and I can't tell you how many times the teachers would tell me or tell, you know, the girls I was talking to at the time that I was a bad influence, they shouldn't spend any time around me. And there'd be girls like plunging pencils into guys' hands and getting like detention, and then we get like thrown out of school or, you know, suspended for 10 days. My brother brought a slingshot into school and he got suspended for 10 fucking days. And this was
10 days
10 days out of school suspension for bringing
that's like a fight at my school. You had to get in a real bad fight to get suspended for 10 days.
Yeah, well, I you know what's funny is I never beat that, and I was the way worst behaved one. My brother just brings a slingshot in, just 10 days. My dad was like, yeah, I was like,
he holds the record now.
Yeah. My dad's like, I was laughing in this guy's face, like, you're really gonna throw him out over a fucking slingshot? What do you think he's gonna do? So and that kind of pushed me away from this egalitarianism idea and the ideas I was hearing a lot of feminists prop up. And, you know, I'm sure we all heard that you know, women make 77 cents per man's dollar, and Obama talking about the mattress girl, right? Emma Solkowitz, who was paraded around all the magazines, and she completely destroyed this kid's life. And then it turned out later that that was all a lie. It was all a fabrication. There was text to prove it and everything. And I kept seeing this stuff happen. And I feel like it's almost controversial for me to talk about this stuff, like the anti-feminism stuff, because there's a lot of people in libertarian circles who are, well, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but so left-wing, so egalitarian, that you can't say that, like, there is a very, very poorly situated hierarchy here where women are supposed to be believed at face value no matter what. And then you can completely ruin a man's life and there's no consequences for it. Um, was there like a paradigm shift for you, or was this something that you just never really bought on to?
I never called myself a feminist, but I've seen some pretty cringy Facebook memories from myself that I really need to just do a live stream of me just reacting to my old Facebook posts, because it would just be a treasure trove of cringe. There were definitely some things I shared, like I would share like raise girls and boys the same and like that kind of stuff, which definitely like effeminate, right? How horrifying is that? Woo, we can get in. That's a whole nother subject. But I would share things like that on the face, they just sound like, again, wow, look, just slogans, and you don't think anything of it.
Right.
It seems like, wow, maybe just any kind of slogans, not even just libertarian ones. You should probably look into those before you just go spouting them off. But I would share things like that, but I never called myself a feminist. I had some friends who called themselves feminists, and I always thought it was a little cringy because I'm like, they'd be like, I said, well, why are you calling yourself that? And they'd say, well, I want men and women to be equal. And I would think,
yes, the typical answer.
One, I would think, are we not? But then two, I would also think, well, why does that need a label? Isn't that what everybody thinks? Normie me, which, to be honest, that is the default for most people. Right. They might not take it to the crazy conclusions leftists do, but I think most normal people, if you said that to them, they'd be like, yeah, men and women are equal. Yeah, we have equal rights and things like that. They would just not think anything of it. And then there's me like, no, egalitarianism, like going full autistic about it. But I used to share things like that. I think the biggest paradigm shift for me was on a lot of things, was starting to date my husband. So I have a brother. He's my only sibling, and we're only 15 months apart. So we went to high school pretty close together. We were pretty close in grades in like middle and high school, but he was always really, really good at school and always got really good grades. So I don't think I ever really saw the, at least directly in my circle. I would see guys in my class get detention, which I was in detention on too, because like 7th grade on, I did not like school at all. We had snack rotation. That's how much we were in detention, just for not doing our homework. Nothing like I was not getting in fights or anything like that. Obviously, I mean, look at me. But
you're 6 foot tall and net worth.
Oh right, I forgot. I'm 6 foot tall. Yeah, I was destroying them all. But when I started dating my husband, yeah. When I started dating my husband, he started to talk about how he doesn't really like school, and teachers are treating him differently. And I could tell, I obviously knew he was very smart, and he got good grades still, but you could tell he just hated it. And I never really understood why, because I was told that I hate school and something's wrong with me because I don't want to do homework. Like my mom made me go to a psychologist because she was like, is someone like touching you? Like, why are you not good at school all of a sudden? I'm confused. Which, I mean, to be fair, it was just a good mom thing to do, I think, if your kid suddenly changes in behavior. But in retrospect, I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually makes sense that like a lot of kids just don't learn that way. There's nothing wrong with you for not learning that way. You just didn't like it. And I hit like 6th, 7th grade, and I used to love school. Like I would wait for school supply shopping day every year. So excited. And then I met my husband and started talking to other guys that I was like meeting in college with like Young Americans for Liberty and stuff, who I knew were very intelligent people, but they just did not care about school. And they were having experiences where actually my mother-in-law had to get this is so ridiculous, but it's a good example. My mother-in-law had to get a doctor's note to give to one of my husband's teachers in grade school to tell them, you're not giving them enough recess time. You need to go let him run for like 15 minutes, like halfway through the day. Just like let him go outside, run around, because that's what boys need to do. Boys, that's just how boys are.
Right.
They just tend to have more energy. They can't sit still that as much longer. It's not because they're not ADHD or ADD riddled. That's just how boys are. They're just typically more rambunctious. They don't learn that way. They need to run around and be crazy, and that's just how they are. And I I had never had anybody tell me stories like that growing up. And like I said, my brother was always very good at school, and never really had complaints like that. And then when I started dating my husband, we've been dating since we were 18. So we've been together for a decade this May. So it's been a long time. Just over the years, talking to him and talking to other people, especially in online circles, especially guys, about their experiences, particularly with school, but also with just how women treated them. I started to realize something's up here. Like this narrative that my feminist friends have about, oh, I'm the oppressed, clearly is not institutionally, it's not even institutionally true. Like they'll say, well, it's institutionally, not socially. Some of them will try to argue that and pretend they're not as radical as they are. That's not true either.
Yeah.
And I started I think I'm a person, like when I'm presented with evidence, I can look at the evidence and go, okay, wait a second. This is not what I've been told. This is not matching up. And that's eventually what started happening with like gender dynamics and things like that. And then a couple years ago, so that's why I've never considered myself a feminist, because it just, one, I mean, the people that use the label, I just look at them and I'm like,
Right.
no, I don't want to be called that. And just the things that they were saying didn't match up. And then a couple years ago, I got involved kind of just by chance. I don't really know why. I just started reading a lot of red pill, like manosphere type stuff. And now a bunch of them follow me on Twitter and retorted me.
I've seen, yeah.
And I don't really know how that happened or why. I don't know. But I started reading a bunch of that stuff, like actual like intersexual dynamic stuff. And that really put it together. And honestly, even I people are like, oh, you're so based. No, like readings, like the Rational Male series and stuff like that, it did challenge some assumptions that I had about myself. Because I think, first of all, every woman likes to believe, well, I'm the outlier. I'm so special. And then reading that book, I'm like, I would tell my husband, read this. I don't do this, do I? And he would go, oh, I'm like, oh, yep. Wow. Okay. I guess I need to like really take a step back and think about what this is actually saying and try not to get triggered by it, but just, soak it in and really, eventually I just realized it's fine that we're different. It's fine that we do different things. Yes, women tend to be more neurotic than dudes, but that's fine. My husband said, you gotta be a little crazy to carry a human for 9 months and pop it out of you. Right. You have to be a little crazy because that's an insane thing to take on and do. And I used to get mad at him when he said that, but now I'm like, no, I think you might be right. You just have to be a little crazy, but a good kind of crazy. Right. You just got to channel that in the right direction. And men channel their tendency to focus on things and like really get at things and produce things into a good direction. And that's how things are supposed to go. When things start getting all willy-nilly and we're arguing and, oh, we're all equal and we can all be the same, that's when things go really south. And it became very obvious pretty much, I think, over the course of like the last 5 years, probably. I probably had pretty normie opinions on like gender and things like that until like the past 5 or 6 years. But it was basically just a culmination of years of dating my husband and like hearing his stories and just his actual experiences with other people besides me and crazy things. And then our friends, just other guys that we knew that like were in our social circles. And then getting involved with like red pill stuff and really getting to like, I mean, I hate to say science TM, but like the evolutionary science and stuff behind it is real. So that kind of stuff. So I don't really think there was like one moment. It was just kind of
a gradual
culmination of experiences of me eventually going, okay, I wasn't feminist, but I don't think I realized, and maybe it's just because I'm a girl, we tend to make everything about us. So I just thought, I'm not having that experience. You can't be having that experience. That doesn't make any sense. And then realizing, well, no, I'm a girl, you're a boy. We do have very different experiences. And actually the fact that none of my girlfriends were having that experiences just lended to that. Clearly something's up. So yeah, it was just a culmination of a lot of different things. I don't really like to call myself anti-feminist because I'm like, I used to be really annoyed when people be like, I'm anti this, and that's like their whole personality. I'm like, can't you be pro something? Why do you got to be anti? But now I'm like, no, I'm anti-egalitarian. That's feminism, all that stuff. I'm fine with that now, but back in my Lolbert face, I used to be like, I just want to be pro stuff. I don't want to be anti stuff. It's like, well, if you're principled at all, you're going to be anti some stuff.
Right.
You have to be.
I agree. I get annoyed with the red pill, blue pill terminology being used in a political context, because if you look at a lot of these guys, and even guys who are like good on just about everything, they'll say they're the most red pill dude in the world. You know, they swallow the whole bottle of red pills when it comes to politics. But then, like, if you look at their dating life, they're like, to use the correct terminology, yeah, they're completely blue pilled in the dating term, in the dating world. Like, I'm dating a single mom with a whole bunch of kids, and I'm so frustrated because I'm such a nice guy and she won't sleep with me anymore. but hey, guess what? I'm red pilled on the state.
Well, actually, I used to get bothered by, because I do think a lot of people that are in the red pill sphere, like the manosphere guys, you can tell they're more socially conservative. They just don't say it. I'm like, I can tell by the things you tweet, and you're not pro-feminist and all this.
Rollo
You
Tomas
clearly have a political
20 years.
Right. Like, he's got a kid,
Right.
But I used to get mad because especially Rollo would say things like, the red pill is not supposed to be political. It's amoral. It's just, you apply it to your life, use it. I don't care what your politics are. Dig yourself out of this hole with women that you're in, whatever you're in, this blue pill mindset. And I used to get frustrated with that, but I definitely, like you just said, there's plenty of people, especially, and I another reason I hate it is now, I think Michael Malice has talked about this a little bit too, because he uses the red pill, blue pill stuff.
I hate it. I'm sorry.
I hate that red pill is like, red pill is Republican and blue pill is Democrat. And then I've seen some cringy libertarian be like, I'm yellow pilled. And I'm like, I hate it here. That is not what that means. Please stop. Like, so now I completely get why all the guys in that kind of sphere get kind of peeved at that, because that's where it always goes. You always see this Republican dude being like, yeah, I took a whole bottle of red pills, and he's like on his third wife and he's dating a single mom or whatever. And you're like, dude, no, you're clearly, you overdosed. Something went wrong because you've come full circle. Something happened. But pump the brakes, buddy. You need somebody needs to get in there, because clearly something's wrong. You read the directions wrong. Yeah, so I definitely, I'm a lot more sympathetic these days, kind of like you were saying. Like, I don't like when it's applied politically, and it always comes off cringy anyway.
It does.
Even if the person is red pill, like, people call me based in red pill. I'm like, okay, I get it's funny, but I would never like call myself based in red pill. Is not something you call yourself. It's bestowed upon you. Okay.
Right.
That's the other thing. You cannot go around calling yourself, I'm so red pilled. It's like, if you have to call yourself red pilled, you're probably not red pilled.
Yep. Well, I see some people liking the tweets I put out when I kind of poke fun at people who use this terminology a lot in the political context, because I do think a lot more libertarians need to kind of like up their games. Like, dude, you guys are fucking losers. And this goes back to the point I was saying a little bit earlier, where like the people who are advocating for sex work probably need it the most.
Yeah.
And it's like, it shouldn't be that way. You guys should be completely solid individuals, leaders of your household, and then you can go out in the world and try to make some kind of change. And I know it's very Jordan Peterson-y, but
clean your own room first, then you can clean other people's rooms. Well,
clean your room, bucko. Yeah.
But wash your balls, bucko. But really, there's a point to that.
Right. Please. Yeah. I shouldn't smell you 3 rows over at the Libertarian Convention.
Don't. But yeah, no, seriously. There is I've liked, I don't know if you are familiar with Travis on like kind of libertarian Twitter sphere. He
Travis
does a lot
Tyree?
of like, yeah, he does a
lot of him.
He does
Absolutely
a lot of fitness
love
stuff.
Him. Yes,
and
that's
I like
my boy.
seeing somebody like that's like in our spheres. That's like, no, like you need to be building mass. You need to be, it cracks me up. But it's true. You're absolutely right. You can't, and that's something that that I kind of went through as well. Like from like 2019, like right after we got married in 2019, my husband and I were like, oh my God, we're so fat. Like this. And I know people look at me and they're like, you were never fat. Listen, when I'm being hospitalized for heart issues because there's 30 pounds sitting on my chest, something's wrong. You can say that's not fat for most people. That's fine. Something is wrong. That was too high a body fat percentage for my body. I was not healthy. I was eating like garbage. Now I eat chicken like 3 to 4 times a week. But you know, I lost like 25 pounds, 25 or 30 pounds. My husband lost like 60. He's still on his, he's like, I'm going to have a 6-pack. I'm like, you go, you get there, you get lean. He's still on his journey, but we're both so much healthier than we used to be. And you do, I know it's a meme, especially in fitness Twitter. You do feel better when you look better and you're taking care of yourself and you're eating better, not even just physically, when you're not, sitting on the couch. I notice during the day, if I'm sitting on the couch, I'm watching TV a bunch and I'm not doing stuff around the house that I know I have to do, I feel worse mentally. Right. It's a normal thing. People feel better when they're productive, not just like physically, but mentally too. Do something that you enjoy, that you want to be doing, and better yourself. And I do think that is a huge, it's a huge blind spot, especially among libertarians. I've been saying, might not be completely optical, but I've taken to the phrase, guys, physiognomy is real. Like, there's a lot of people I can look at, and if you're like a fat slob and you're like not taking care of yourself and things like that, 9 times out of 10, I can look at you and I'm like, you're probably not a right-wing libertarian. You're probably like a little bit of a left wing. And if you're like borderline, I'm like, okay, you're probably getting there. You're on your way. But like, it shouldn't be easy to do, but it is. I mean, they've even been coming out with articles. They've come out with such stupid articles. And at first I laughed at them, but I was like, oh my gosh, maybe there's something to it. Like saying like, lifting and stuff is for right wingers and reading books and stuff is for right wingers. You think that's ridiculous. But then you get into online circles and you think, wait a second. Like the people that are saying post physique are right wingers and they look really good. And they're replying to these like soyed out, like, clearly way too high body content dudes that don't take care of themselves, that are simping for all these people under Twitter comments. That's who's doing that. It's not anybody that values themselves that's taking care of themselves. So that's a huge thing that I think libertarians need to get on board. And I do unironically think if more people took care of themselves, they would just start to become right wing, because I think they would just start to apply it to everything else in their life.
Yeah, well, that's kind of why for the longest time I like struggled to make myself, I don't want to say a public figure because that's pretty cringy, but to start doing a podcast. Put yourself out there, yeah. Right, because 3 years ago now, I was 250 pounds. I just started dating my fiance. Oh yeah, I was way heavier. I've put pictures up on Twitter, and I think it was episode 49 of my podcast on YouTube. I reviewed like my physique, as self-indulgent as that was. It was for the purpose of kind of explaining my history and how I got to where I am now. So part of this podcast was to kind of bring more health into libertarianism and perhaps bring a little bit more libertarianism into the health sphere. And I'm noticing very, very surprisingly, it works out very, very well, right? Rob Wolf. There's
definitely an overlap.
So Rob Wolf, the guy who pretty much popularized the paleo diet, I mean, he's been on the show twice, and like you couldn't distinguish him from pretty much one of us, other than the fact that he kind of like likes the Conservatism Inc. guys. He pretty much says, yeah, we need to go down to a local level and resist this kind of shit and, buy from our local farmers. He's a dude who's married and has a couple kids. I don't,
there's not that much difference.
Right. Sean Baker, I had him on, and, he's completely against all the vaccine mandates, and he's all about, take care of his family and once again, buying food locally, resisting, this ridiculousness. A lot of these people are allies, and I think it's an untapped resource that no one in the libertarian sphere has really kind of put 2 and 2 together. And I'm not saying it's going to work perfectly, and I'm not saying I'm going to be the grand messiah here, but you've made this point before, and maybe we could close on this. Kind of affect the culture in your sphere. I was watching your video with about Nicki Minaj today, and I had a cursory understanding of kind of what went on there.
Yeah.
And once I kind of watched your video and heard what she had to say, it's kind of shocking how someone like her, who 22 million followers on Twitter and one of like the biggest radio stars in the last like 20 years, talks like a normal person, not like the normie kind of person, like somebody that's like questioning authority. It
Right.
really
And
surprised me.
not like, and she wasn't doing it in like an autistic, like, guys, we have to fight the federal government kind of way. She was just
Right.
like, it was clearly just someone putting two and two together, like, wait, why are we being told this? This doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Yeah, she was just literally asking questions that
Questions.
that anybody should be able to ask. And the
Yeah.
funniest part was that they fucking dropped the hammer on her. Everybody had to go in. You had to get the articles. The fucking White House called her, for fuck's sake.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Absolutely
So
hilarious.
we could, like I said, we could finish on this. Is you're into cosplay, which is really, don't I'm not saying this in a pejorative way, but like strange, because yeah, I kind of understand how those circles kind of go. Or at least have a cursory understanding. Right. Do you feel you've been successful there? And just how's that kind of been for you trying to affect that culture?
It's been kind of tough, especially with what's been going on like the past 2 or 3 years. Like, I probably won't go to conventions and stuff anymore, just because I'm quite literally not going to be allowed to, because I'm a second class citizen now.
Right.
But one of the most frustrating things, and this is why I'm such a big proponent of people speaking up, and I know, I mean, mostly because of Eric July, watching what he's done with, the music scene and comics and stuff, and just also being unashamed to just be like, yes, I'm a libertarian, I'm an ANCAP, but I also do this stuff, and I really like this quote unquote nerdy stuff. Definitely inspired me to just be like, yep, I'm a cosplayer and I'm an ANCAP, and you guys might be crazy leftists, but like, there's also normal people. And I have had a bunch of people privately and some publicly just reach out to me and be like, I'm lefty, but I don't like this cancel culture stuff, especially with cosplay. So for context, for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically just costuming. Oh, you think of like like most normal people know about, New York Comic-Con and stuff like that, people that dress up as superheroes. I do that, but it's mostly Japanese, like cartoons, like anime and stuff. But there's people that do all kinds of stuff and do crossovers and things, but it's very leftist culturally. And it's actually so leftist culturally that even at conventions, and my husband and I have been talking, it's almost like anime conventions are becoming like pride conventions. It's so weird. There's such a big like leftist influence. Maybe, I don't know if it's because of the furries, I don't know. But there'll be like 18 plus, at least they're making it 18 plus, but there'll be like pride panels and things like that are clearly like very heavily leftist culturally, but you don't see anything the other way. Like, I could never give a talk on like, the economics of X anime or something like that, because people would be like, one, probably not interested because so many people are leftists. But the other thing is, there's such a big mob mentality, of course, because they gatekeep. Again, they will gatekeep you. They will kick you out. There's a couple people that I follow on Twitter that have private accounts that are extremely right-wing, like probably like more, I don't want to say more right-wing than I am, because I think I'm the most right-wing as like an ANCAP, but like maybe like right-wing authoritarian, like women in like cosplay community. And I follow them, their private accounts, but I could never say who they are, and they won't say it publicly because they just know they would just get called racist and all kinds of stuff and just get absolutely obliterated. But it's frustrating because I'm like, I have talked to enough people that there's an underground, if not right wing, just normal people who just don't want to talk about politics. They just want to enjoy their anime fandoms. They're tired of this BS and everything being about pride and race and everything like that, when clearly the Japanese don't give a single flying F about identity politics or any of that. They're not changing anything.
Right.
No matter how much Western audiences kick and scream. And that's something that I appreciate about it. I don't have to worry about some anime that I watch getting retroactively, at least in the subtitled, in the dubs. A lot of times, if it's on an English platform, they will switch things up, so you got to be careful. So I watch the subtitled stuff a lot, because they keep it pretty much true to the actual story. But that's why I enjoy that stuff so much, because you don't really have to worry about them trying to be politically correct, because they just don't care about the West. They're just doing them, and they know the people in the West that like it are going to consume it regardless because of that. So that's been kind of refreshing, but it's been kind of frustrating because there's a huge underground, definitely, of people who are just normal people I do think they're speaking out a lot more though, especially over the past 3 years, because I think there was a big frustration. As many people as there were who still are posting, just got my booster, you should go get yours on their Instagram stories so they can get thumbsy uppies. There's a lot of people that were very frustrated with restrictions that were being put down on pretty much every single convention. There's a convention near me. I never had a mandate. They were mandating jabs and masks. And I thought, why? You don't have to do that. The city is not making you do it. You can't hide behind the government making you do it. This is ridiculous. Their attendance was abysmal, like completely.
As it should be.
It was like the convention was getting maybe like 5, almost 6,000 people. People were posting hallway photos just from like the convention center, and there was maybe 2,000, maybe, that's being very generous, 2,000 people there. Like it was over halved because people just didn't want to deal with that. It could have also been some people were still too scared to go outside.
Right. I think that's probably to a lesser degree.
Yeah, but I really do. And I would look at the comments and it would be about 50-50. People being like, this is BS, or, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Which the irony is the people that are saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much. The conventions that were running were before the jabs had come out. So they didn't even feel safe enough to go to your convention and support your vendors. So you're pandering to people who aren't going to come out and support you anyway. And so I don't know. I think conventions have been dying for, at least in the anime scene, for a pretty long time. So I do kind of hope that maybe there will be people coming up to compete against them and be like, no, actually, we don't care. Just come. We just want this to be normal again. But it's been nice because I have met quite a few people. Even if it's in private, it's still nice to meet people that aren't crazy.
Right.
That are in your hobby. There's a girl locally that I talk to quite a bit who there was this big controversy every once in a while in the cosplay community. Some white cosplayer would inevitably cosplay a dark skinned character. I'm not going to say black because they're never actually black. They don't have black people in Japan. Trust me, I've been there. It's like 99.998% Japanese. It's kind of how it works. They're tan, but a white person will like tan their skin and everyone will freak out and be like, oh my God, you can't tan your skin for that brown skin character. That's racist. That's like, they're not even black. They're tan. I just tanned to be tan for the cosplay. Or sometimes you'll just see like I've cosplayed Nessa from a Pokemon game. She is black, or at least Islander of some kind, I think. And people get mad and they're like, oh my God, why are you cosplaying that black character? And it's like, because I like them. But it, like I said, again, it only goes one way.
All right.
Black people cosplay anime characters that are white and they don't even like do it accurately. They'll have like a green afro instead of like straight bangs and straight hair, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, yes, queen, so great. But it only goes one way, and half the time I can't even tell who the character is. That is how like inspired that is and not really accurate to the character. But there's been a lot of pushback against that, especially with like the stuff over the past couple of years, I think. So I do have a lot of hope for it. But that's why I eventually I used to separate. I do have a cosplay page and a Facebook page, and those are separate. But like on my Instagram and my Twitter, I do both, because if you don't like one or the other, that's fine. There's plenty of people who follow me and they're like, your cosplay's weird, man. I don't get it, but I like your politics, so I just deal with it. Right. So, which is fine. I mean, not everybody that, follows Eric July likes comics, or that follows Dave Smith likes comedy and stuff like that. So, but it's just what you have to do. And I think we need more people in specific hobbies. You don't have to be in your face. Like, I'm not making posts like my ex favorite anime character says taxation is theft, because like I think that's kind of cringy. All right. But I can be a person with those views and also have this hobby and say, yeah, I have these views and I have this hobby, and try to be an example for other people. So that's really all I'm trying to do. And I think I've seen a lot of other people start to do it too, which of course is always good, because like I said with the gatekeeping stuff, I'm not ceding the term libertarian, and I'm not going to stop cosplaying because there's a bunch of crazy leftists, which I have been attacked for. Before I got kicked off Twitter on my other account, I had tweeted, it was in the heat of the Black Lives Matter stuff, again, the Minnesota stuff. Gosh, I don't even know what year that was now. Was that 2 years ago now, or 1 year? I don't know.
2 years.
2 years, yeah. And so that makes sense because the craziness with the whatever we're going through right now was going on too. And all I did was say, hey, why were all of you, just curious, why were all of you fine with people protesting with no masks on, marching down the streets, hundreds and hundreds of people, but you're not okay with us going to conventions without masks on? Well, oh my God. Oh no, I'm anti-Black Lives Matter, which I am. But I didn't even say that in the thread. I just said, hey, this doesn't really make sense to me. Of course it was, well, it's for justice. I'm like, fine, I'll wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt to the convention. There you go. It can't get me. I can't get sick now. That's what you just told me.
Protect yourself from the goof.
I'm wearing a justice t-shirt, okay? So I'm fine. Like, people got so mad and came after me, but I didn't go anywhere. I was like, no, I'm going to continue to ask these stupid questions because you guys are not making sense. You're not making any sense at all.
Right.
So, just like the people with hammer and sickles in their bio that are pro-Ukraine right now, I'm like,
I always, I kind of thought it was ironic, and I don't want to drag you into this conversation because I saw you muted it, but it's funny. Donald Trump was a Russian asset for the last 5 years, but he literally sold weapons to Ukraine, which they're using against Russia.
Yeah. I actually
can we square that?
I also heard the entire reason that Putin is invading the Ukraine is because Trump told him to, as a thank you for rigging the 2016 election for Trump. That is an actual unironic, like, blue checkmark take that I saw. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these people jump through impressive.
I'm like, he's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
well, so kind of touch on anime real quick, and then we'll wrap.
Sure.
It's funny. The Asian countries have a higher IQ. They're homogenous, and they're mostly healthy. And COVID seemed to kind of breeze right past them. It wasn't too bad. And they make a higher income. They live pretty well overall, even when they come over here to America. Mm-hmm. And look, I'm not saying I'm like, this is what Stefan Molyneux got canceled over. Or I shouldn't say canceled over, but everyone got mad at him for saying this about Poland, right? A homogenous, high IQ, tight-knit family country does very, very well in almost every regard. Not saying we should enforce that, and I'm not saying that people who don't live exactly that way are bad people, but maybe we should take a note of that and think about that going forward. Maybe some of that stuff makes a difference.
Man, I will say though, you couldn't pay me to live in Japan. I love Japan. Yeah. It was great to visit. We went there for in 2019. Luckily, we got married in 2019, so we went on our honeymoon to Japan for almost 2 weeks, like that October. So we just missed all the craziness because Japan is like, we're shutting the country down. They're using it as an excuse to completely close themselves off again. We're done with society again. You guys are crazy. But it was really nice to visit. Very clean. Everyone was very pleasant, and I don't speak Japanese. I'm not one of those people who's like, I like anime, I speak Japanese, and I want to be Japanese. Nope, not me. I just think it's cool. Mm-hmm. And I like the fashion a lot. I have a bunch of clothes from there, normal clothes, not costumes that I wear on a daily basis. But it's very different. You go there, and it's a vastly different culture than here for sure. Mm-hmm. One thing I will say is too quiet. Maybe it's just because I'm American. Mm-hmm. It's too quiet. Tokyo, we went to Tokyo. It's a huge city, millions and millions and millions of people, and it's quiet. And that's creepy.
Are you serious?
It's creepy.
I couldn't fucking believe that.
It was a huge adjustment. Actually, I watched a bunch of videos before I went, and I said, we need to talk quietly when we're talking because my husband's got hearing problems, and I talk really softly. So a lot of the times we'll talk really loud because otherwise he can't hear me. And I was like, we do not want to be those loud Americans that are being super rude and all the quiet. You get on the train and there's a bunch of people and no one's saying a word, and you're just
everybody's staring at you.
Okay, yeah, because that's the other thing. I knew they were homogenous, but you don't know what homogenous means until you're in a homogenous country, and you're like, right. Whoa, okay. And then everyone looks at you when you go places, and you're like, oh man, I'm like a unicorn right now. This is crazy. But it was really nice, but I don't think I could live there. I prefer the American culture, even if we have a lot of issues, for sure. Just
Right.
so nobody watches us back as like, oh, she's a filthy weeb. She just wants to be Japanese. No, I couldn't move there, but it is really nice to visit. I would recommend people visit it. It's a really, to me, that was my first. I went to Poland when I was in 8th grade, so a long time ago. And Poland was beautiful, but as an adult, it was really nice to travel to Japan because I feel like, even though it might not seem like it's a really easy country to navigate, even if you don't speak the language, because everyone's so polite and nice and everything. So it's a really good like international travel experience for like people who don't do that a lot. I feel like some European countries, they'll just like look at you nasty if you're like trying to talk to them and you're not at least trying to speak the language and stuff. But the Japanese won't do that because they don't like confrontation. So it was really nice.
Yeah, that's
Long
yeah.
But they
No,
are
you're good.
healthy. Well, I figured out how unhealthy I was. That's why I needed to lose weight, because they do a lot. They walk everywhere. That's why they're so skinny. They walk everywhere. I mean, they have trains, but besides that, they walk everywhere. And thank God I had tennis shoes with me. Like the first day or two we were there, we had to take like a 2-day break because we were so sore just from walking so much. We have cars. We drive everywhere here. We don't, it's not places where we have like trains. It's just completely different way of living. So that was one of the things that spurred both of us to get healthy, is going over there. One, seeing how everybody, I mean, gosh, I don't think I saw a single overweight person over there, like at all.
Yeah, go to your local Walmart here.
Right, is where it's like you just go to Walmart, like you're like you're like in the top 10% of human beings if you're like under like 200 pounds. Like,
yeah, my God. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But
craziness.
You know what's kind of funny is that actually Asians do have a lower personal fat threshold. So sorry, I'm going to take us on a huge side tangent. Yeah. So basically, at a certain point, they can't get as obese as, let's say, I could, because I could get pretty damn fat. But
well, is this like the fat cells thing? Like
so basically their fat cells will hypertrophy at a lot lower of a threshold than like perhaps mine would. So their fat, right? So once they get to a certain point of being overweight, then their fat eventually starts to surround their liver, and they get the not adipose tissue, I can't remember, the visceral fat, the fat in your viscera, which surrounds your organs. They get to that point a lot sooner than perhaps I would. If they were like 250 pounds,
they're just gonna die.
yeah, it would be way worse. Whereas I could get to like 400 pounds.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I have Asian in me. I don't know. I gained like, maybe I'm not as white as I think I am. I gained like 30 pounds and I was in the hospital because like my body just couldn't take it. Like it was just, my husband went on the whole fast. He was like fasting for 3 days at one point. So he was like really serious about it. But he explained like all the fat cell thing, like, well, you just have less fat cells than I do. That's why you've been quote unquote skinny, even though you're clearly not in shape. Whereas me, I'm literally built. He's got like Polish ancestry. He's like, we're built to put on muscle and fat. Yeah. Like he puts on fat just as easy as muscle, because it's just like, that's just how his body works. But whereas me, I'm just like a limp noodle over here. So if I gain like too much fat, I just like, I can't sit up correctly.
Yeah. All right, Mac, this has been awesome. We touched on a lot of different stuff, and I felt quite a few light bulbs kind of flicking on throughout the conversation. And I think that's kind of what I was excited for, to kind of hear your explanation for some of the different right-wing stuff, because sometimes it almost seems a little bit masturbatory when people use these terms, because it goes back to the red pill, blue pill stuff, is that once again, it's something that I can pat myself on the back for. Look at me, I'm so fucking red pilled. So where can everybody find you? What do you got going on that's cool coming up in the future? And any plugs, and we'll get rocking and rolling.
Yeah. Honestly, the best place to just find everything, all my social media, I have a merch store and stuff like that, and a Twitch and everything, is Kenziepuff.com. So Kenziepuff, one word, KENZIEPUFF.com. And all my social media is linked on there. Everything's pretty much linked on there. And there's even like bio section and stuff if you missed anything in the episode and things like that. So it's the easiest place to find me.
Oh yeah, I think we covered I don't know if there was anything really left off the table there.
Probably not.
But you're welcome back here anytime. I'd love to have you back on again sometime to discuss anything that's going on in the future. very enjoyable podcast. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. And I think a lot of libertarians should take a lot of this stuff to heart. They could definitely use it. So, yeah, once again, I'm glad you were able to come on, and looking forward to talking in the future. So, if nothing else, we'll get rocking and rolling.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. Of course. All right, everybody. This is In Liberty and Health. Take care.